Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who held their ground against pressure, entitlement, and outright criminal behavior. One involves a homeowner who refused to add his girlfriend to the deed and watched her family's true colors emerge. Another, a traveler who let karma work through airport security. And the last, an HOA president who learned that cameras don't forget. Here we go. I worked a decade for this house. Her family wants her on the deed immediately. I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, owning a home has been my thing. Not just a goal in the vague someday sense, but something I've worked toward obsessively. I skipped vacations, drove the same car for 10 years, invested carefully, and built my savings brick by brick. So when I finally signed the papers on a $1 million house earlier this year, it felt like crossing a finish line I'd been sprinting toward since my early 20s. My girlfriend, Kate, and I have been together for 3 years. We moved in together about a year ago into a rental, and the plan was always that when I was ready to buy, we'd move into something more permanent. I told her early on that I'd been saving for this and that I was serious about buying within the next year or two. She was supportive, but she made it clear she didn't want to put money down. "I'm not ready to tie up my savings in a house," she said when we discussed it, "especially if we're not married yet." I didn't argue. I respected that. So when the time came, I put down the entire down payment myself and took out the mortgage in my name. The deed's in my name. I told her openly, when we get married, I have no problem adding you, but for now, since I'm the only one financially responsible for it, it makes sense to keep it this way. She didn't object at the time. We toured the house together. She helped pick paint colors. We planned where the couch would go and joked about finally having a guest room that wasn't doubling as a storage closet. Everything felt normal. Then her family found out. It started with her sister, Jenna, during a Sunday dinner. "Wait," Jenna said, forked midair. "Your name's not on the deed?" Kate hesitated. "No, it's just in his name for now." Her mom put her glass down a little too hard. "That's not right," she said. "If you're building a life together, you should both be on it." I tried to keep it calm. "I put the down payment down myself, and we're not married yet. I'm not against adding her when that happens." Her mom looked at me like I just admitted to hiding offshore accounts. "If you don't put her on the deed, then you don't trust her, and you can't build a marriage without trust." That sentence has been living in my head ever since. I do trust Kate. I've never gone through her phone, never questioned her loyalty, never felt like she'd betray me. But trust and legal ownership aren't the same thing. A deed is a contract. It's equity. It's liability. It's not a symbolic gesture. After that dinner, things shifted, subtly at first. Kate started asking more questions. "Why does it matter if my name's on it?" she asked one night while we were unpacking boxes. "It matters because if something happened between us before we're married, I'm the one who put everything into it," I said. "It's not about planning for failure, it's just practical." She sighed. "My mom thinks it's weird." "I'm not dating your mom," I replied, maybe a little sharper than I intended. That didn't go over well. She said herself she wasn't ready to tie up her savings. That was her choice. She respected it. Now her family wants you to tie up yours as a gesture of trust? That's not how math works. You can't opt out of the investment and then demand half the equity. The tension isn't just about the house. Her family and I have clashed before about finances, about boundaries, about how involved they should be in our decisions. They're very tight-knit. Opinions are shared loudly and often. I come from a family that minds their business unless asked. Since the deed conversation, I can feel her perspective shifting. At first, she didn't seem to care. Now she's quieter when it comes up, more distant. The other night, she said, "It just feels like you're protecting yourself from me." "I'm protecting the investment I made before we were legally tied together," I answered. "That's not the same thing." She didn't respond. She just nodded in that way people do when they're filing something away. Part of me wonders if I should just add her name and move on. It would end the arguments. It would quiet her mom. It would show some grand gesture of commitment. But another part of me keeps thinking about the reality of it. If we split up next year, she legally owns half of a house she didn't financially contribute to. That's not mistrust, that's math. And here's the part that's bothering me the most. When we bought the house, she never once mentioned the deed. Not during escrow, not at closing, not during move-in. The concern only appeared after her family weighed in. That's what's sticking with me. It feels less like a trust issue between us and more like outside pressure reshaping her view. Last week, her mom called me directly. "You need to understand," she said, "a man who won't put his partner on the deed is a man planning an exit." I almost laughed. I'd been planning this house longer than I've known her daughter. The exit plan would have been not buying it at all. I told her calmly, "I'm not planning an exit. I'm planning a future, but I'm not signing away equity based on guilt." She didn't like that. Kate and I are still together. We're still living in the house, but there's a weight in the air now that wasn't there before. Every time the topic resurfaces, it feels less like a financial discussion and more like a loyalty test. I don't know what the right answer is. I love her. I see a future with her. I have zero issue adding her to the deed once we're married, once we're legally bound in a way that protects both of us. But I can't shake the feeling that making a massive legal decision to appease someone else's family is a wrong foundation for a marriage. And if trust is really the issue, I can't help but think that forcing someone to prove it by signing over $500,000 worth of equity isn't trust at all. It's leverage. I worked too long and too hard for this house to turn it into a bargaining chip in someone else's narrative. If we're going to build a life together, I want it to be because we chose each other, not because I folded under pressure at a dinner table. Right now, I'm holding the line, not out of spite, not out of suspicion, but because a relationship built on ultimatums doesn't feel like one that's ready for joint property ownership just yet. Dear Lord, why is this even worth considering? If they're insistent on it, then they did you a huge favor in showing you their true colors before it's too late. And our second story. A couple kept hitting me with their suitcase in the airport security line. In my early 20s, I did a lot of solo travel, cheap flights, questionable hostels, and a hiking backpack that had seen more pavement than it probably should have. On this particular trip, I was flying out of a small regional airport somewhere in Europe at an hour so early even the vending machines looked exhausted. Security had just opened and there were maybe 20 people in line. One agent was running the checkpoint, and everyone stood there in that half-awake airport haze, clutching passports and trying not to hate humanity before sunrise. I was traveling light with just one large backpack. Behind me stood a couple in their 30s or 40s with one of those massive hard-shell roller suitcases that looks like it could survive re-entry from space. The woman was pushing it in front of her like a battering ram while muttering to her partner in a language I didn't understand. The line shuffled forward, and I stepped ahead to close the gap like a normal human being. Immediately, I felt the suitcase slam directly into the back of my leg. It wasn't enough to injure me, but it was hard enough to notice. I turned slightly and looked at her, expecting the universal nod of apology. Instead, she stared past me like I was an inconvenience that had personally wronged her. I shrugged it off because accidents happen and everyone is tired at airports. A few seconds later, the line moved again, and I stepped forward. Once again, the suitcase hit my calves, this time with more force. Now it was deliberate. There was no way someone could misjudge distance twice in the same slow-moving queue. I adjusted my stance slightly to the side to give her more space, but somehow the suitcase still found me. It was almost impressive in its precision. I turned fully this time and just looked at her. She made eye contact without the slightest trace of embarrassment. Her partner leaned in and muttered something that clearly wasn't complimentary. They both looked irritated, as though I was personally responsible for the fact that airport security does not operate at the speed of teleportation. It kept happening. Every small step forward was followed by a sharp nudge to the legs. I considered saying something, but I didn't speak their language, and I had zero interest in escalating into some dramatic international argument before coffee. I also got the strange sense that they were almost baiting me, hoping I'd react so they could play victim. So instead, I chose the calm route. I stared directly at them a few times while it happened, making it very obvious I knew what they were doing. They saw me. They just didn't care. That's the part that gets me. You gave them every chance to act like normal people. You moved aside, you looked at them, they just kept going. It wasn't an accident after the first time, it was a choice, repeated over and over. During this ongoing suitcase assault, I made eye contact with the security agent more than once, It wasn't theatrical, just brief glances exchanged over the crowd. The agent clearly saw what was happening. No one else in line had been pulled aside for additional screening. It had been smooth and routine for everyone. Still, I said nothing and waited my turn. Finally, I reached the front of the line. I handed over my passport and boarding pass. The agent scanned everything without comment. I placed my backpack on the belt, walked through the metal detector, and didn't even get a beep. Within seconds, I was on the other side putting my shoes back on and preparing to move on with my day. Then it was their turn. The agent stopped them and calmly said they would need additional screening. The woman blinked in confusion and asked why. The agent didn't elaborate. She simply directed them toward the separate room for a full search. Up until that moment, not a single passenger had been selected for extra screening. The timing was immaculate. The couple started protesting immediately. The woman gestured dramatically, and the man attempted that polite but annoyed smile people use when they think charm will solve things. It didn't. 2 additional staff members appeared and escorted them toward the side room. As they passed me, suitcase in tow, the woman looked briefly panicked. I met her eyes and offered the most neutral customer service style smile I could manage. Was it random selection? Possibly. Was it coincidental timing? Maybe. But I couldn't ignore the fact that the agent had watched the entire suitcase saga unfold. Airports are stressful enough without someone weaponizing luggage against strangers for sport. Whatever the reason, their morning just became significantly longer. I slung my backpack over my shoulders and walked toward my gate, feeling strangely light. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't started a scene, I hadn't escalated anything. Sometimes patience is enough. Sometimes karma works through fluorescent lighting and security badges. I never said thank you to the agent, but I definitely thought it. And our last story. That truck looked abandoned, he said, after cutting my tires and having it towed. 5 years ago, I moved into what I thought was the perfect neighborhood. Quiet streets, well-kept lawns, low crime, and most importantly, an optional HOA. That word optional was the only reason I signed the closing papers. I'd recently come into enough money to buy the house outright, and I wasn't about to spend my piece arguing over mailbox paint colors with the retirees who needed a hobby. I own 2 vehicles, a 2004 Toyota Camry that gets me everywhere I need to go, and a 1999 Ford F-150 that I bought when I purchased the house. The truck helped me haul furniture during the move and has been my reliable workhorse ever since. It's old, sure, but mechanically solid. I keep both vehicles clean and maintained, nothing flashy, nothing neglected. The HOA president at the time, let's call him Harold, did not appreciate my refusal to join his little kingdom. Harold was a recently retired man with too much time and too little purpose. He showed up at my door within a week of me moving in. HOA application in hand and a rehearsed smile on his face. "You really should join," he said. "It keeps property values up." "I appreciate it," I replied, "but I bought here because it's optional." He tried again and again. Applications showed up in my mailbox, handwritten notes about community standards. Eventually, I stopped being polite. "I'm not joining," I told him one afternoon. "You can stop asking." That's when the fines started. Letters claiming I was in violation of HOA bylaws, landscaping infractions, vehicle standards, improper storage, all nonsense. I attended a meeting to confront him, and the board tried to insist that simply living in the neighborhood automatically made me a member. I actually laughed. "That's not how contracts work," I said. "I've had a lawyer look at this." I handed them a cease and desist letter. They skimmed it, turned red, and told me to leave. The fine stopped for a few months. Then they started again. I returned to another meeting and told them plainly, "Continue this and I'll see you in court." After that, the fines ceased for good. I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, I came home from work and noticed something off immediately. My driveway looked too empty. My F-150 was gone. At first, I thought I'd parked it somewhere else. Then I checked my security cameras. There was Harold walking up my driveway like he owned it. He pulled a pocket knife from his pocket and calmly stabbed all 4 tires in the sidewalls. Then he unscrewed my license plates, put them in a bag, and walked off. About 20 minutes later, a tow truck arrived and hauled my truck away. I called the police immediately. This wasn't HOA nonsense, this was theft. We traced the tow truck to a local junkyard that also operated a small impound service. When we arrived, my blood pressure hit the ceiling. My truck was already on blocks. The hood, headlights, radiator, bumper, gone. Panels removed. Catalytic converters cut out. 4 guys were mid-disassembly like they'd found treasure, and standing there talking casually with the yard owner was Harold. He went pale when he saw me with the police. "That truck looked abandoned," he stammered. "It was an eyesore." "It was in my driveway," I said, "on my private property." I showed the officers the camera footage. Harold tried to charge toward me, yelling about property values, but that earned him handcuffs instead. The junkyard owner, Harold's cousin it turned out, claimed he thought the truck was legitimately HOA ordered and abandoned. The police weren't particularly amused. I stood there watching as the yard workers were ordered to reassemble my truck, every single part. Immediately, they were not happy about it. I got plenty of muttered comments and dirty looks, but I didn't care. They had hours of work ahead of them undoing what they'd rushed through. That's the image that sticks. Harold thought he'd gotten rid of an eyesore. Instead, he's standing in a junkyard watching his cousin's employees put your truck back together piece by piece under police supervision. He went from HOA president to criminal defendant in the time it took you to play back your security footage. Parts had been damaged during removal, coil packs cracked, coolant lines sliced instead of disconnected, one headlight mysteriously dead. The catalytic converters had to be welded back in. When they fired it up the first time, I heard the misfire instantly. "It's fine," one mechanic said. "It's not," I replied, "and I have video proof it wasn't doing that before." The police agreed. New parts were ordered from a nearby auto shop. All 4 tires had to be replaced because of the knife damage. They worked late into the night. I didn't get my truck back until the following evening. When I finally drove it home, it honestly ran better than before. They'd essentially given me an involuntary overhaul. I still consulted a lawyer. I sued Harold personally for trespass, theft, and destruction of property. The footage made it an easy case. He ended up paying for all the repairs, reimbursing the junkyard, covering my legal fees, and losing his position as HOA president. Shortly after the settlement, he sold his house and moved away. The HOA hasn't so much as mailed me a flyer since. Ironically, my neighbors thanked me. Apparently, Harold had been issuing petty fines for years. Grass height measured with a ruler, garbage cans left out an hour too long. He'd finally gone too far with the wrong person. And yes, I've been back to that junkyard. My Camry needed a replacement grill, and they happened to have one in excellent condition. They recognized me immediately. The looks I got could have curdled milk, but they didn't say a word. I paid for the part, loaded it into my truck, and drove off in the same F-150 they once tried to dismantle out of spite. Some people think an HOA is about community. For Harold, it was about control. He gambled that I'd roll over or back down. Instead, he ended up funding a full repair job on my truck and relocating himself out of the neighborhood he was so desperate to police. Funny how that works. Let's talk about who really won. Story 1 was the cost of clarity. The OP worked a decade for that house. His girlfriend opted out of contributing. Her family demanded half the equity as a true gesture. The pressure didn't work. He held the line, and now he knows exactly what he's dealing with, not just her family, but how easily outside voices can reshape her perspective. That's not paranoia. That's information. Story 2 was karma with a badge. The couple thought they could weaponize a suitcase for sport. They didn't count on the security agent watching every bump. The random extra screening wasn't random at all. They got to spend their morning in a side room while the OP walked to his gate smiling. No argument, no scene, just perfect timing. But story 3 wins, not because of the truck, though watching it get reassembled piece by piece is its own kind of satisfaction, but because of the stack. Harold tried to force HOA membership, failed, tried fines, failed, then escalated to felony-level vandalism. He thought he was untouchable. He forgot about cameras. He ended up funding a full repair, paying legal fees, losing his presidency, and moving out of the neighborhood he was so desperate to control. The truck came back better than before. He didn't. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.